Retired Brigadier General Peter Zwack. He's a Wilson Center Global Fellow at the Kennan Institute. General Zwack, tell us why this town, Avdiivka, that Ukraine just lost to Russian forces, is so important and so symbolic.
Thank you for having me on, Brianna. Avdiivka has been part of the Ukrainian fight since 2014, when the first Russian invasion occurred. I was in Moscow at the time, and we were all tracking this very closely. Bigger battles around Donetsk. The Russians were pushing into the Donbass, and the Ukrainians were able to maintain a line with Avdiivka and holding half of Donetsk and Lugansk. Now, 10 years later, the Russians, for the last 9 months, especially after the fall of Bakhmut, think of Verdun when you think of these places, are going all out for Avdiivka. And the Ukrainians have fought hard, as they had in Bakhmut. They're taking heavy losses. They are inflicting terrible losses on the Russians, but the pressure is heavy. It's increasingly across the front, less ammunition for all-important artillery, and less air defense, and the Ukrainian defense is straining and creaking. And Avdiivka is not going to be the end of the defense by being taken. It's important, but not critical. But at the same point, it is a prestige victory, especially for Putin, as was Bakhmut and as was Mariupol, if we all remember a year ago. But the Ukrainians are going to withdraw more defensible lines and fight, but they are under enormous strain for all the reasons, both on the combat field and supplies and international aid.
And obviously, there's this fight in Washington over aid to Ukraine. The U.S. Army has been using funds from its Europe and Africa commands and shifting it to the fight in Ukraine. But it's getting to the point where if Congress doesn't pass aid to support Ukraine, the Army is going to be diverting money from things like barracks construction and recruiting incentives. Obviously, there's a recruiting problem for the armed forces here in the U.S. Explain why the U.S. government would make that choice rather than just sort of throwing up its arms and saying, well, we can't send any more military aid to Ukraine.
First of all, there are defense supplementals that can be passed, can make it a priority. We can do all these things, including the wall. And if one former ex-president said, oh, I support Ukraine, everything would open up. But he hates Ukraine. Remember, Trump was called out in 2019 on a phone call during the campaign, and that led to his first impeachment when he was trying to put pressure on Zelensky. So he has terrorized his Republican Party, and it's blocked. And he is visceral about it, and his admiration for Vladimir Putin. I'm sorry to go on a track, but it's all related. We can do this. I think you would ask most senior American military and policy makers, commanders and policy, that would they support continuing to help Ukraine, and they would say yes. We are an amazing nation, Brianna, we all know it, and we can make it happen.
Why would they give up things, General, like barracks repair, much needed? Why would that be a calculation where they would say this would make sense? We need to give up recruiting incentives. We need to shift those funds for now. This is actually more important. Can you explain, as you would to the American people, that calculation?
I think, Brianna, we're looking at this as an existential issue. What is remarkable at this time is that NATO just had its ministerial. You had the Munich Security Conference. We have a huge NATO exercise involved in, and God bless, Navalny was killed just a few days ago. All of this should play in our domestic debate. The funds are there if they shift them around or do a supplemental. I believe that it can be done. The urgency of supporting Ukraine at this time is I mean, we're all seeing it with the fall of Avdiivka and the increasing Russian pressure, the increasing confidence, seemingly, with Putin. And this is to our national interest, and that needs to be told and sold to our U.S. public of all stripes. Again, the military, we need the barracks, we need the training and all that. And I believe that we can balance it. But this is a time I don't want us in a year or 2 years having the big debate domestically: who lost Ukraine? And a really unstable Eastern Europe and a resurgent Putin-led Russia.
And that may be the reality if this doesn't happen. General Zwack, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
As always, Brianna.
So ahead this